We often ask why killers commit murder, but maybe the more uncomfortable question is when it began. In childhood trauma, in isolation, in the need to be seen or feared. Today we will explore three true crime books that look beyond the crime scene and into the minds behind it. From calculated violence in cold blood to manipulated devotion in helter-skelter and a house haunted not just by ghosts, but by human history in the empty will hollow. These stories leave us with one haunting question. Are killers born or slowly made?
Welcome to the Killer Instinct podcast, where we delve into some of America's most infamous killer minds. My name is Oliver.
My name is Anton.
My name is Konrad.
And we have a couple books to go through today. But why don't we start with a seminal true crime and new journalism work, which is In Cold Blood, by Truman Capote.
Yes, let's do it. And in Cold Blood, Truman Capote especially follows these murders in Holcomb of the family,
Clutter family.
The Clutter family,
Yeah.
committed by Dick Hickok and
Perry Smith.
Perry Smith, two killers, especially Perry Smith, more on that. And it is a pioneering work of new journalism combined with the true crime in the way that it's journalism, but it fits in these fictional elements. It's framed as a documentary, but filled with mystery of all sorts.
And it's very much structured like a novel, even though it is
exactly.
Very, very real events that he's talking about.
Yes.
It's given, you might say, a subjective edge because it uses different storytelling techniques. And also combined with true crime, it makes for a very interesting combination because true crime really takes us into the minds of these people, these killers, these subjects, however you might want to say it.
Yeah, and with this style that this book and Truman Capote is an amazing example of new journalism. There's also an element of the writer being present at the place. He's almost a character. He talked with all these people that committed murders. He didn't just investigate it, which is also a point of criticism because is it too biased? The example is with Bishop Capote's relationship.
He sympathizes with Perry Smith.
Exactly. He's actually said, this is a quote I stole from his Capote's lifelong friend, Gerald Clark, who says he saw a reflection of himself in Perry, and they both have this shared passion for the artistic. Both wanted to be artists, but as he said, Perry walked out the back door while Capote himself walked out the front door. Was successful,
and that shows very clearly how. One of the strengths of this genre is that you get this view into not only their psychology but their backstory as well, and what we see from this and the other works that we're going to be talking about, that most or all of these people who commit these heinous acts have had very rough childhoods, often have had accidents or drug issues, or etc., etc. And we can see that also in the other one of the other works talking about, which is Helter Skelter, written by Vincent Bugliosi.
Yeah, it's important to note there's some subjectivity and bias here as well, because Bugliosi was actually the prosecutor for Manson and those of his family who were convicted for the murders of Sharon Tate, famously, among others.
And you can really tell when you're reading the book his bias as well.
He has a quite clear motive of what he wants to do with the book. He wants to present the case and himself in a good light.
Yeah, and a lot of the time you can feel the bitterness through the pages when he's talking about the police who investigated the case, because according to him at least, they made mistake upon mistake upon mistake, and
they made it very hard for him as a prosecutor.
Yeah, and he's the one who had to deal with all that.
Yeah. I want to also say that even though Bugliosi doesn't have this close relationship with Manson like Capote did with Perry, we still get a view into Manson's psychology.
Yes, and that is, again, one of the central things to this genre, where in both of these works, what actually motivated these people to commit these crimes is, unlike maybe traditional journalism, is actually front and center and very, very important to the stories. And a common thread for all of them is that we are dealing with a manipulator and someone being manipulated by that person.
Yes.
So there is a degree of sympathy being made because we are by nature so close to these people, but of course that still doesn't excuse the kind of person they are.
No, but it maybe explains it.
Yeah, there is some explanation to it, some method behind the madness, you might say.
Yeah.
But all of these people that we're covering, we have Perry and Dick, Manson and his family. All of them have vulnerable backgrounds. Manson was in jail for most of his life, had a very tough childhood, much like many of his family members. They too were vulnerable. That's why he was able to pick them up. They had tough childhoods, such as, I believe it was Susan Atkins.
A.K.A. Sadie Mae Glatz.
Yeah, A.K.A. Sadie Mae Glatz.
She had a troubled childhood as well, and she was also, before meeting Manson, influenced a bit into the drugs world and the sex trafficking world. And that's where he saw weakness, he saw fragility. And then he would use all these different techniques, manipulation techniques, psychological techniques to,
he would isolate the members of the family, and he would, something we would now probably call love bombing, which is something we're retroactively applying to this. Obviously, it wasn't a term used at the time, but
it would mean that he would latch on to people and he would tell them all the things they want to hear, all positive things, make them feel valued and loved, so they became dependent on them with this way.
Drugs and sex as well.
Those were his other techniques. A lot of LSD particularly, and he gave himself less LSD while having his sermons where he taught them about his ideology and what's right and wrong. And then he also used a lot of sex to reinforce both his own control and use it as a reward or even punishment for others, to have this strict hierarchy among the family. And I actually have a quote here that really demonstrates the control he ended up having over these people. It is, at least twice Charlie made statements that would cause the others to say amen 2 or 3 times in unison. Also, a few times when the others would become involved in whispered, giggly conversations, Charlie would simply look at them and immediately they would fall silent. I mean, that you can't have a more clear example of the kind of power he had over these people in his family.
Yes, and the same goes for Dick Hickok and Perry Smith. Dick was also very deliberately manipulating Perry, at least that's how it's presented in Cold Blood. And one of the interesting things that also gets mentioned in that book is, again, delving into the psychology of what they back then would call sane killers with insane behavior or something like that. And obviously some of it might be a little outdated since it was written in the 50s.
Yes, you can imagine.
Yeah. You can imagine that, but still a lot of it applies. They did a study on some of these killers, not just Dick and Perry, but that kind of killer, where they described it as, despite the violence in their lives, and that's the people in the study, all the men had ego images of themselves as physically weak, inferior, and inadequate. All of them, too, had been concerned throughout their early years about being sissies, physically undersized, or sickly. And that certainly applies to Manson as well. I mean, he was, 157 tall. And with Dick and Perry, they also both had a lot of these issues surrounding their own masculinity and their own sexuality, and all these things, which certainly made someone like Perry easy to manipulate.
Yeah, they were almost opposites in terms of sexuality, though. I mean, Perry had a bad view of sexuality, while he thought that Dick was over-sexual. And we do see some examples. He had pedophilic tendencies, for example. So there's some proof of other issues at play there. But there's one more book we have. And this one is different in that there is no physical manipulator. It's the Ronald DeFeo case from Amityville Horror. Murdered his entire family, told people afterwards that it was voices in his head that told him to do it. Now there's obviously no proof of this, and the defense at the case didn't accept it either. But he was vulnerable because we don't know much about his childhood, but he was a drug abuser and an alcoholic. So definitely some mental issues there.
And again, we can see threads of true crime in this story, but obviously the actual content of the haunting of their house appears to be, or actually they said as much as in a court case, that the story was pretty much entirely made up.
Yeah, so while it is a kind of true crime in that we delve into some psychology of, not so much the killer, but definitely the family, it's a different kind of book.
It's filled with supernatural elements. Of course, the trope of the haunted house and the evil spirit that haunts the lost family. It's a different kind of book compared to Helter Skelter and in Cold Blood.
Which we might consider true crime.
And this is a little bit more fake true crime in a way, made up true crime. And throughout all of these stories, but especially in Cold Blood and Helter Skelter, we see these people who are both victims and collaborators at the same time. And people like Dick and Manson clearly were excellent in finding the right people to manipulate. And I actually have a quote from In Cold Blood about this. Dick became convinced Perry was that rarity, a natural killer, absolutely sane but conscienceless and capable of dealing with or without motive the coldest-blooded death blows.
Yeah, so if you have this killer instinct, stay away from people like Dick Hickok and Charles Manson.
Thanks for listening to the Killer Instinct podcast. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.